What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X of Swords crossover event, and we actually pick up with Chapter 2, which is X Factor number 4. Now, with that being said, when it comes to X Factor number 4, Chapter 2 of the actual crossover event of X of Swords, it actually is the beginning of the crossover. And what I mean is that X-Men number 12, the prelude, was a way for Marvel to set up the crossover. And Chapter 1, which was X of Swords creation, was also a way for Marvel to kind of set up the crossover. But when it comes to X Factor number 4, Chapter 2 of X of Swords, it is actually where we begin the process of crossing over between all the X-Men books. So X-Men, X-Force, X-Factor, Wolverine, Cable, all the X-Men books. Now, with that being said, we do pick up with X-Factor number 4. And I do know that some fans do not like X-Factor because it was the weakest link out of all the X-Men books. But we have to cover X-Factor number 4 because this is the book where the X-Men actually learn what swords are needed for this crossover event. Because remember, Saturn did tell a group of X-Men characters, especially Polaris, what swords are needed for this event. Because right now there is a war between the mutants of Arrako and the mutants of COPPA. And they're going to have their big battle in Otherworld in front of Saturn. But before they're able to do that, both sides have to get their swords. And so Saturn told the X-Men Polaris what swords are needed for this crossover event. And now she will take that information and bring it back over to the rest of the X-Men so that they can begin the process of finding these swords and actually using these swords in the big crossover event. And so getting into X Factor number 4, we actually pick up where the last chapter left off at. Now remember, at the end of the last chapter, our X-Men team that went to Otherworld to figure out what in the world is going on with the army of Arrako and the army of Armeth that is trying to come over to COPPA. When they got to Otherworld, they come to find out that basically the children of Apocalypse had turned evil, because originally they were sent over to Armeth with Arrako as a way to keep a powerful being over there. But something happened. For some strange reason, they have joined the side of the bad guys, and now they're leading that army of Armeth back over to Earth. But of course, to get to Earth, they have to go through Saturn and Otherworld to get to the external gate that leads right over to COPPA. Now, of course, the X-Men team that went into Otherworld to see what in the world is going on, when they got there, they were confronted by the children of Apocalypse. And of course, the children of Apocalypse, with them being evil now, they attacked their father and badly beaten him down, but they also killed off Rockslide, and Richter got also injured as well. Now, with all that information said, though, you had the X-Men team learn what swords they needed for this event, but then they ran back through the external gate to come back over to COPPA to get patched up, because Richter and Apocalypse, they're badly injured. On top of that, Rockslide died. And so right now the big question is, can they bring Rockslide back to life? Because remember, with the new era of X-Men comics, they actually do have a way to bring people back to life by just making clone bodies of them and downloading their memories into those new clone bodies. But either way, though, the big question is, can Rockslide come back to life? But that is the moment we actually do see Saturn use her powers to shut down the external gate. Because remember, she hated the gate the entire run of Excalibur. She hated the mutants, especially Apocalypse. And so now, with her actually having the ability to just shut down the gate, she does shut down the external gate. And so now the X-Men don't really have a way over to Otherworld except going through the brother of Bessie Braddock, Jamie Braddock. Because remember, in Otherworld, he has one of the many kingdoms under his rule, Avalon. And there is a gate in Avalon that the people of COPPA could use. But the external gate, the second gate they made that could lead into Otherworld, is no longer around, thanks to Saturnine. Now, of course, with the external gate closing, there was some kind of feedback, and that feedback actually affected Polaris, the daughter of Magneto. And of course, everyone is wondering what happened to her, because she came through the gate perfectly fine. But once the external gate had closed down, something happened to her. Some kind of feedback from the gate shutting down actually affected her mind. At the same time, Saturnine was playing with her mind as well, getting her ready to share the information she needs to share with the rest of the X-Men characters on COPPA. But later on that moment, we actually do pick up with Rachel Summers and Monet trying to access the mind of Polaris. And the reason why, because Polaris cannot remember what prophecy Saturnine had put in her mind, because that prophecy is going to tell the X-Men what kind of swords they need to gather if they want to be able to actually save the day, to save Earth from the army of Arrako. But of course, every single time Rachel Summers or Monet tried to access the mind of Polaris, Saturnine had put some kind of psychic trap in Polaris' mind, so that if anyone tries to access that certain memory, they are instantly kicked out. And so right now is Rachel Summers, Monet, and Polaris just wondering how long do they have to wait until they're able to actually figure out what kind of source they need for this entire event. But then we jump over to Apocalypse and Richter, because right now they're in the healer's room. Of course, Healer is an X-Men character who has the ability to, well, heal. But either way, right now you have the healer trying to heal Apocalypse. But Apocalypse wants the healer to use his abilities on Richter. But you have the healer tell Apocalypse that Richter is going to die soon. We can bring him back to life, but there's a bigger chance we can actually save you. Now, Apocalypse does not like the idea. He wants to keep Richter alive, like they have some kind of special bond. But either way, though, you do have Apocalypse begin the process of trying to kill the healer for not trying to save Richter. But of course, someone comes in and stops Apocalypse from killing the healer. Of course, the person who was trying to stop Apocalypse from killing Healer was Dr. Reyes and also Rachel Summers. By, of course, accessing his mind, they realize that Apocalypse is being affected by his children in his mind right now, some kind of psychic poisoning. But either way, you do have Dr. Reyes and Rachel Summers being able to stop Apocalypse from actually killing off the healer. But later on that moment, we actually do pick up with Charles Xavier and Polaris meeting up with the Five. Now remember, the Five is basically 5 mutants on COPPA who had the ability to bring almost anyone back to life by making them a new clone body, so that Charles Xavier can download the memories of that person into that new clone body. Now here comes the big thing though. Of course, you have Charles Xavier read the mind of Polaris to kind of catch up with everything going on. And so you do have Charles Xavier tell the Five they need to bring back Rockslide, since he did die over in Otherworld, but also bring back Richter because he did die in the healing room. And so of course you do have the Five begin the process of actually bringing back Richter and also bringing back Rockslide as well. Now, of course, some time does pass by and we actually do see a new version of Richter and a new version of Rockslide. But this is where things begin to fall apart for the X-Men. And the reason why I say that is because right after Richter and Rockslide are brought back to life, you do have Charles Xavier begin the process of downloading the memories of Richter into his new Richter body. But when it comes to Rockslide, there is some complications. And this is why. Because when Richter died back on COPPA. But when Rockslide died in Otherworld. And so, for some strange reason, there was some powerful feedback when Charles Xavier actually try to download the memories of Rockslide and the new body of Rockslide, to the point where basically it shuts down Cerebro, knocks out Charles Xavier, and Rockslide is not like who he should be right now, which of course means because Rockslide died in Otherworld, there could be some complications with bringing someone back to life if they die in Otherworld. Now this leads into another problem, and that problem is you have the 5 freak out because they have made other eggs after making Rockslide and Richter, and of course those eggs are holding new clone bodies of other people who have died in the past. But here comes the big problem though, and why they're so worried. They're afraid there could be some kind of virus that could possibly affect the other eggs, because Rockslide came back out and Rockslide basically fell apart right after coming out. And what if Rockslide has some kind of virus inside of him that could possibly affect the other eggs? And so you have the 5 just kill off these eggs, and these eggs were holding new clone bodies of characters who were trying to be brought back to life who had died over the years. And so that is the moment you actually have Charles Xavier realize that this is Rockslide from their universe, but also not their Rockslide. This could be a different version of Rockslide from some alternate universe they have no idea about. And somehow that could possibly affect the idea of bringing someone back to life. Because when the X-Men bring someone back to life, like I said earlier, it's them making a new clone body of you and downloading your memories into that new clone body. But now there could be a possibility that if you die in Otherworld and you're brought back to life, there could be a different version of you from somewhere else. And of course, that could cause a lot of problems for the X-Men, because what if that other version of you is not good? What if the other version of you could possibly be some kind of mass murderer? And so right now, the X-Men realize Richter, who died here on Krakoa, he is okay. But Rockslide, because he died over in Otherworld, it made things very difficult for everyone. But then you have this big meeting going on with the Quiet Council, where they're basically trying to figure out what is the next move. What is the next move now? Because it now seems like Rockslide could be possibly gone forever, because now it seems like if you die in Otherworld, the version of you that been around in the main Marvel universe is gone forever because you die in Otherworld. And so meaning that Rockslide, the one they have right now, is a different version of Rockslide from a different universe possibly, but the original Rockslide, he's gone forever. There's no way that Rockslide could possibly be brought back to life at all. And so now this makes the X-Men rebirth process very complicated and confusing. But either way though, you do have Magneto get very upset with his daughter, because Polaris is the only person who knows what 10 swords the X-Men need right now to gather as a way to fight for Krakoa in their big battle against Arrako. But because she can't remember, you have Magneto actually yell at his daughter to the point it finally unlocked her memories. Now, I'm not going to sit down here and explain what the prophecy was, but basically now the X-Men knows what 10 swords they need to get as a way to defend Krakoa from the army of Arrako. Now, this leads into a very cool moment of the book. And the reason why I say that, because you do have Polaris basically use the bones or the rocks of Rockslide's body to make something new. Because the other version of Rockslide they had, it died off. And so you have Polaris basically use the body of that other version of Rockslide to make something else. Now, while she's doing that right there, you have Magneto and Charles Xavier tell Apocalypse that he failed. Because remember, all of Excalibur was Apocalypse just trying to build some kind of gate that leads to Otherworld so that he'll find another way to go over to Armeth to hopefully save his family. But of course, his experiment failed, and now his children could possibly bring the end of all things on Earth. And so right now, you have the X-Men actually let Apocalypse die because his wounds were just too severe. But don't worry, because since he's dying on Krakoa, he'll be able to be brought back to life. But Rockslide cannot. And so you have Polaris actually make some kind of some kind of thing on the ground on COPPA. And this thing is where the 10 X-Men characters are going to gather here for this big crossover event. When those 10 characters are able to get their swords, they must come here and wait for the others to gather here so that they can go over to Otherworld to fight against Arrako. Now, with that being said, the X-Men are very lucky that one of the X-Men is already there with her sword. And of course, that person is Magic. But again, there are still 9 other swords out there the X-Men must get. Now, Cable, he has one of them. So it means there's still 8 other X-Men out there who still have to get their swords and bring their swords over here to get ready for the battle against Arrako. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.